So I'm from Miami Beach, a couple of blocks away from the ocean, to a town a few hours south of the Arctic Circle.
That is some vintage Contrabass Conversations footage from Charlie DeRamus, someone I've got to get on the show sometime again. That was over 10 years ago at this point. I'm Jason Heath. This is, like I said, Contrabass Conversations, and we are doing best of episodes here, rounding out year 2018, year 11, I think, for the podcast. My goodness. And in those 11 years, we've done over 500 episodes. And thanks to Krista Copper, we've got this amazing catalog that she's put together of what was talked about and when. So these episodes are an attempt to synthesize some of these topics that come up time and time again. And today's topic is Expat Adventures. Folks from the United States that moved to other parts of the world and either stayed there or maybe they came back, but their experiences and opening their eyes. And I'm just such a fan of travel and exploring the world. So I just resonate so strongly with all 5 of these stories. You're going to be hearing from John Goldsby, Marc Ramirez, Jennifer Downing Olsson, Charlie DeRamus, who you just heard, and we'll round it out with Kristin Zoernig. They've all had interesting journeys through the music world, like all of us, but they've had a significant portion of their career, or maybe most of their career, overseas. Big shout out to our sponsors. We're just going to briefly mention them here because these are short episodes. The Bass Violin Shop, Colstein Music, Steve Swan String Bass, Upton Bass, and DeRamus Strings. You'll learn much more about them in future episodes, or you can go back in the catalog and definitely go to our website. They're all linked up. So thank you to all those fine folks for making this show happen. Here we go with some great thoughts and some music, by the way, from John Goldsby. Talk about culture shock in so many ways, but not negative culture shock necessarily. That's a beautiful thing.
It was different, and here I can do something that I couldn't do in New York, or I couldn't do much in New York, is that here every little town around throughout the country or in the area, it seems like they have a local theater, or they have a culture bureau, they might have a jazz club, and it's possible to go out as a musician who's not Dave Holland or Stanley Clarke. It's possible to take a band out and go on a little tour and play in all these clubs with my own music, which in New York would have been very hard to do, I think. I mean, I did play some gigs where it was whatever, the John Goldsby quintet or quartet there, but in New York, everybody's, scuffling as a side person to make a living. Here, there was time for me to work on my own music, to get some bands together, to play little concerts here and there. Yeah, that was a positive aspect of me moving to Europe.
On one of these interviews on YouTube that you had, you were describing how remarkably similar Cologne and Louisville are, which I thought was fascinating. Like, how are those two towns similar?
Well, I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. It's a town now that they've incorporated every possible area around. They've got almost 1 million people, or I'm not quite sure, maybe 1 million. Cologne, Germany is about the same size, and the cities are sort of culturally defined by these rivers that they're on. And Louisville, the Ohio River, that was the trade route. That's why Louisville developed into a real city, this trade route up and down the Ohio. Cologne has the Rhine. It's also a famous river. Back then, when I lived in Louisville, there was a big Ford plant. There's a big Ford plant in Cologne. The UPS hub for Western Europe is here in Cologne. So they fly every day to Louisville, which is the UPS hub for the Midwest. And I've tried for years to get on a UPS flight. I've met pilots and I've met executives. I say, I could just sit in the back and go to Louisville, But at that's never worked. I guess it's a company policy. They're both not huge cities, but they're big cities, and they've got vibrant music scenes, universities where they teach classical and jazz music, and they're, in a way, kind of liberal cities. Even though Louisville's in the south, I'd say it's the northernmost southern city that I've encountered. And Cologne is also known as the northernmost point of Italy, or the westernmost point of easternmost point of Holland. It's sort of a melting pot in Cologne.
Yeah, I love those tracks. And I had such a great chat with John. Definitely listen to the whole thing if you haven't. And these are all linked up, all of these past episodes in the show notes. And we're going to dig in next with Marc Ramirez, who is the former principal bass of the Gulbenkian Orchestra in Portugal. And this is a story about just how this audition experience unfolded, how Marc, there's humor, there's pathos. I really enjoyed talking with Marc about this a few years ago, and I think you'll really dig it. A little bit of a longer clip, about 15 minutes, but I think you're really going to enjoy going on this journey with Marc and me.
My teacher, Tim, said, "Hey, I just got a call," and this is an interesting story. It's kind of like old school auditioning. Mm-hmm. He gets a call from a director of a music department, or not a music department, but a musical institution in Portugal, saying that their music director and the service director is in New York, and they're looking for someone to fill a spot for 1 year in Lisbon, Portugal. Okay. So I was like, yeah, great. Lisbon, Portugal. Man, where the hell is that? You know?
Right.
I'm a New Yorker, so, and New Yorkers are like, that we're the center of the universe, yeah. And so everything else is just like, the boondocks. So I was like, Lisbon, yeah. Isn't there a Lisbon in Ohio? And he's like, no, this is in Portugal. And I was like, oh. All right. Well, I was already, prepared to be, taking auditions. I think there were some other auditions coming up during the year, and I had already been starting to prepare for them. So I said, well, why not? And so Tim said, sure, okay, I'll pass your number, and they'll give you a call. And so I get this call from this very distinguished gentleman. His name was Luis Leal, who was director of the service at the time, who had a very strong accent, Portuguese accent, but was speaking English. Mm-hmm. And he said, yes, we're looking to fill a position for 1 year, a tutti position in our orchestra. Would you be interested to come play for our music director? And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. What would you like me to play? Whatever you'd like to play, just come meet us at our hotel, and you can play for us in the hotel room. And I've never played an audition in a hotel room, but mm-hmm. And so I was like, all right, this sounds kind of weird, man, but it sounds like the days back, when Cincinnati Symphony was being formed, and what's that guy's name? Hirsch, the agent, would call people in and pick his orchestra. And so there was a couple of students of Tim's who went to the hotel and played, and there was Luis Leal, the director, and the music director was Muhai Tang. He was Chinese. Mm-hmm. And so I entered the room, and I said, okay, what would you like to hear? And they said, well, play me a solo. What solo would you like to play? So I played Kusevitsky First Movement for them. And then they said, oh, well, so what kind of orchestral excerpts you have ready? Well, I had all of them. Yeah. I was studying them. So, Beethoven 5, Beethoven 7. You're going through the Strausses. And I think the last thing I played, I went through maybe 6 or 7 excerpts, and the last one I played was Otello. And they said, okay, great, thank you. And, I didn't hear from them for about 2 months. Mm-hmm. It was very strange. I was like, all right, that's great. And so 2 months passed by, they get a phone call. This is August of 97. And they're like, where are you? I'm like, where am I what? I'm like, you're supposed to be at rehearsal. And I'm like, who am I talking to? And I'm like, this is the orchestra manager of the Gulbenkian Orchestra here in Lisbon, Portugal. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. I'm supposed to be there for rehearsal? Yeah. Didn't the conductor inform you? So there was some kind of miscommunication. They had wanted me to come, but somewhere, in between there, I never got the message. And so I had one, the invitation to go over there, and I didn't know what to do. So I get this call from the orchestra manager, and he's like, there's some mix-up because it was a Monday, and we have our concert on Friday. And I'm like, yeah. So, well, can you come here tomorrow? And I was like, well, tomorrow, I have a flight case. Yeah, sure. What time is the flight? And they were like, well, it's too late to book for you now. So we'll book you for tomorrow's flight in the morning. So I was just like,
man.
I was like, wow, this is cool. So are you going to send me the ticket? They're like, no. Just show up at the TAP Air Portugal desk, tell them your name, and tell them that the Gulbenkian Orchestra is expecting you, and everything will be taken care of. So, I mean, it was really, really weird. So I get there, I'm like, well, before I get there, I call my mother, and I say, Mom, this sounds really weird, I mean, this is not normal, being an American, being very organized and everything, normally you get a phone call or a letter and saying, oh, these are the dates, here's a contract, whatever, nothing. No, just a phone call I got. And so I get this phone call, and my mom's like, Lisbon, and I was a mama's boy, so she was like, it's very far. My mom, it's only 7 hours flight. It takes me longer to drive to Virginia.
Yeah.
They told me it's a round trip ticket, and so if I'll go there, I do 1 week, and I come back. If I don't like it, don't worry, Mom, everything will be fine. At the time, I had nothing to do. And, why not? I was a little bit adventurous, so I took out the atlas to look where Lisbon was. And I was like, well, that's Spain. And, well, no, it's Portugal. So I'm like, it's Europe. Okay, so it's an adventure. Let's go try it. And so the next day, just, with I don't know, crazy courage. It was a pretty crazy thing I did. I didn't know what I was getting into. I mean, at the time, they had no website. You couldn't look this stuff up. The internet was new. So I asked my teacher, I said, Tim, I'm going to split for a year, and then I'm going to come back. And he was like, Marc, I think it's a good idea, you get some repertoire experience, orchestral experience. You're in one place. You're not running around. And then you come back. And you take auditions. And so he gave me his blessing. Mm-hmm. So I went to Newark Airport at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I was thinking, this I'm probably going to wind up just going back home. And I had my giant gauge case, and I had a backpack, right? Full of, for a week's worth of clothes. So I wasn't expecting to stay so long. And I get there, and lo and behold, I go to the desk, and they say, oh, yes, we're expecting you. That's your instrument? Yes. And so at the time, there was no TSA or anything like this, so the guy just took my bass and rolled it off and handed me my ticket, and it was fantastic. It was a business class ticket. I was like, hey, nice. Free wine. Hey, this is looking better and better, man. I'm like, this is cool. I'm in business class. I'm going to Lisbon. I'm going with my bass, and it's a gig. This is going to be an adventure. So I jumped on the plane. I crashed on the free booze, and it was a nice plane ride, very smooth. We landed in Lisbon, but you got to remember, Lisbon, Portugal in '97 was pre-Euro.
Oh, okay.
So the European Union did not exist yet. They were still talking about it. So I landed at the Portela Lisbon airport, and man, it was like I landed in I don't know, it was the weirdest airport. That's all I can explain.
Okay.
It was a strip. It looked like one runway, and there was this one building in the middle, and there was just a couple of planes. It wasn't. It wasn't, it's like, it was really like I landed on a drug smuggler's airstrip. I mean, I'm looking at myself like, this is Lisbon? Where is everything, And so, they didn't even have those things that swing out, to attach to the plane. You had to walk downstairs.
Oh, man.
And then you had to walk to the terminal. You cross the runway, and then you entered immigration, right? And so I had my U.S. passport, right? I did not speak a word of Portuguese, Luckily, at the airport, I picked up one of those simple phrase books for tourists, and I was able, it was like five pages or something with pictures on how to say hello and where is my hotel, how can I get a taxi. And if you know the Portuguese language, it's probably one of the hardest Latin languages to learn. It is very, very difficult. The basic Portuguese is very hard, especially for a New Yorker who never had to learn anything except for Americanish,
right?
New Yorkese. So, I land here, I get to the immigration, they stamp my passport, they ask me, what are you here for? Are you a tourist? Are you working? And I said, well, I really don't know. I'm here to play with the Gulbenkian. And as soon as they heard the word Gulbenkian, they said, oh, you're working for the Gulbenkian. I said, yes, so we'll come right through.
We'll round out today's Best Of episode with three people: Jennifer Downing Olsson, Charlie DeRamus, and Kristin Zoernig. And Jennifer actually talks about Charlie. They both worked together in Sweden for a period of time, and they both still work in Sweden. Kristin Zoernig works here in the Bay Area now, has a great flourishing career in the early music world, but spent some great time overseas. And so you're going to hear from all three of those. Here we go.
Then I went to New World for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And long story short, I had met my husband, who's Swedish, in Civic, Jimmy.
Right.
And so we did a long distance relationship the 1 year that I was in New World, and I was sort of faced with a big decision, like, stay for 4 years at New World, this amazing place, or are we going to really make this work? So I ended up taking an audition in Sweden, and long story short, I moved there.
And that was the Gothenburg Symphony?
That was actually an audition for the Swedish Radio Orchestra, if you can believe it, the one that I'm in now.
Okay.
But it was a 1 year position.
Okay.
And within a couple weeks, there was an audition in the Gothenburg Symphony, also for a 1 year position. And Charlie DeRamus and I sort of won both of those auditions. We both won both. So we split those contracts for the 1 year.
Okay.
And then I ended up getting a job in Gothenburg a couple years later.
Talk me through what an audition in Sweden is like and how it might differ from a United States audition.
So your typical audition in Sweden is much more solo-based than orchestral excerpt-based. You'll definitely have to play the Dittersdorf Concerto.
So do you know why that has become the standard in the way it has in Europe?
I don't know, but you got to play it on every audition. Okay. And you're going to play the entire first movement with the cadenza, the Gruber cadenza.
Okay.
You're going to play the second movement, possibly with cadenza. Third movement, never.
But first and second movement with cadenza.
Second movement, probably the first thing that you're going to play with piano before you even touch an excerpt. That's what
in solo tuning?
When I first moved there were some auditions still in solo tuning, but nowadays it's orchestral tuning.
Now it's orchestral tuning. Okay.
Maybe Charlie and I had something to do with that. Who knows? Maybe.
Tell me about how you ended up moving to Sweden. What was your first job over there?
The first job that I had in Sweden is with an orchestra called Norrlandsoperan, which essentially translates to the Northern Lands Opera. And it's in a small town called Umeå in northern Sweden. And its claim to fame, although they don't say this anymore, so maybe somebody has built one even more northern, but they used to claim that they were the world's northernmost opera company. So I moved from Miami Beach, a couple of blocks away from the ocean, to a town a few hours south of the Arctic Circle. Yeah, and the way that all worked out was, again, sort of right place at the right time. Funny things. I came home from a rehearsal one day and voicemail for me. At that time it was answering machines, but there was a voicemail waiting for me saying, from Paul Ellison, saying that he had heard about a 1-year thing and he had a former student who had been the principal up there, and if I was interested, make a tape. They were looking for somebody, and so I got to it. And it's one of those things where you just sort of inspiration and focus kind of descends upon you. And I put the tape together really fast and sent it off, and they said, "Yeah, great, come for a year." And I obviously had never imagined moving to northern Sweden, but I'd always been really interested in some sort of European orchestral experience when I was in school and down in Miami. Also, anytime an orchestra would come through on tour, a European orchestra, there was something about it to me that, no offense to any of our beloved American orchestras, but that really spoke to me in a different way. I really was compelled by their playing, and something about it really captured me. So this opportunity came along, and it was something I felt like, I go do this for a year, and if I don't like it, I come back and have had a little experience, and who knows.
And so I was really happy to get the opportunity that summer after following that year, while I was at the ISB convention, in fact, studying. I helped him arrange that and get it all going a little bit, and got to go to the convention as a result. And I had a couple master classes, and one of them was with Knut Gettler from Norway, who was my wild card. I decided to have one wild card for master classes, and that was it. And it's simply because he was Norwegian and a bass soloist. And I knew nothing about him, and I'm part Norwegian, so just by blood. But I was sort of raised. I'm a quarter Norwegian, but I was raised to believe I was 3/4 Norwegian.
As someone from your part of the country, I know exactly what that means.
So I just decided to do that just for fun, to see what was going on in the bass world in Norway, and we had an amazing, wonderful connection at the master class, just an immediate good rapport, and really the stuff he suggested was very useful, and I was able to incorporate it very right there on the spot because of his just really great way of communicating. And he's a self-taught player primarily, and so he really knows how to explain things because he figured them out from the ground up himself. And so I learned a lot. Anyway, he invited me to go study with him at the Norwegian State Academy of Music in Oslo, Norway. And not really being happy with Northwestern outside the School of Music, again, was very good, but I just didn't like all the other crap that came with it. And I was also being harassed a lot for being gay, and that was no fun. So, and I was in fact a little afraid for my safety. So, I jumped on this opportunity, and it was the best thing I could have done, really.
Was that in Oslo that you then went to?
I was in Oslo, yeah.
Okay.
It's right in the middle of Oslo. It's a great town.
Yeah, and a very different town from Evanston, Illinois, or Chicago, Illinois. I'm sure. And I've never been. hoping to get there soon, but it must have been quite an experience.
The musical community there is very rich, and the government has poured all kinds of money into the arts community. They understand and they value what the arts contribute to society, and they've just really created a thriving environment for musicians and artists of all type. If you have an idea and want to do it, they'll fund it, which is how it should be.
Yeah, but how at least here in the United States often is not. But that's
not at all.
Yeah. Wow.
Yes, and they're all you have to do is really literally is just have an idea and want to do it and have the resources to do it. Or they'll provide the resources to do it and make it happen. So the school was fantastic, and being a foreign student, I wasn't required to take the lecture classes, and since I wouldn't be able to write papers and read the books and stuff, so it was ideal situation for me because I could just take playing classes, ensemble classes, and so I took all of them.
That's going to do it for this best of episode. Thank you so much to Krista Copper for going through and cataloging and organizing all these topics. It makes these sort of episodes possible, and I think it's a really cool direction. Thank you also to everybody else involved in Contrabass Conversations, Steve Hinchy, Michael Cooper, our audio editors, Mitch Mooring, who puts these episodes together, and Trevor Jones, who publishes and promotes all of these. Thank you so much. Reach out to me at feedback@contrabassconversations.com, and I am your host, Jason Heath. We'll be back soon with more life on the low end of the spectrum.